The most important performance car of the 21st century did not possess a turbocharger. It didn't have a manual gearbox, and it never saw the inside of a poster frame on a teenager's bedroom wall. It was slow. It was beige. It made a high-pitched electronic whine that sounded more like a refrigerator than a revolution. Yet, while the titans of the industry were busy perfecting the roar of the internal combustion engine, a quiet four-door sedan from Aichi, Japan, was busy rendering their entire philosophy obsolete. The Toyota Prius didn't just enter the market. It dismantled the narrative of what a car was allowed to be. To understand the audacity of the Prius, one must look at the landscape of the 1990s. This was an era of automotive excess, a decade defined by the intoxication of cheap gasoline and the triumph of displacement. In America, the SUV had transitioned from a utilitarian tool to a suburban requirement. The Ford Explorer and the Chevrolet Tahoe were the new symbols of the middle class, while the horsepower wars of the 1960s had been reignited in the form of German super sedans and Japanese halo cars. The memory of the 1970s oil crises had not just faded, it had been buried under a mountain of heavy steel and V8 engines. Climate change was a peripheral conversation, a concern for academics and activists, not a factor in a car buyer's showroom decision. Performance was the only language the industry spoke fluently. If a car wasn't faster, louder, or larger than its predecessor, it was considered a failure. In this environment, the idea of a mass-produced gasoline-electric hybrid was not just unnecessary, it was laughable. But inside Toyota, a different kind of tension was brewing. In 1993, the company launched Project G21. The mandate given to the engineering team was borderline impossible. Create a car for the 21st century that could achieve double the fuel economy of a conventional vehicle without sacrificing the utility of a 5-passenger sedan. Toyota wasn't responding to a market demand. They were responding to a future they believed was inevitable. They were betting billions of dollars on a reality that hadn't arrived yet. When the first-generation Prius launched in Japan in 1997, and later globally in 2000, the industry's reaction was one of polite skepticism bordering on derision. Enthusiasts mocked its narrow tires and its upright, awkward proportions. It looked like a car designed by a committee of librarians. Even the name, Latin for "to go before," felt pretentious to a public used to names like Mustang, Viper, or Charger. The skepticism was fueled by genuine technical concern. The hybrid synergy drive was a labyrinth of complexity. It utilized a power split device, a planetary gear set that allowed the gasoline engine and the electric motor to work in a seamless, constantly shifting dance. It was a systems-level rethink of automotive architecture. For the first time, the engine was no longer the sole protagonist. It was merely a component in a larger energy management system. Critics predicted the nickel-metal hydride batteries would fail within years, leaving owners with paperweights that cost more to fix than the car was worth. Yet, the Prius possessed a secret weapon. It worked. Not just as a science experiment, but as a car. It was reliable, it was spacious, and it delivered on its promise of 50 miles per gallon in stop-and-go traffic, the very environment where traditional cars were at their most wasteful. Then came the cultural pivot. In the early 2000s, something shifted in the collective psyche of the West. As fuel prices began their slow climb and environmental consciousness entered the mainstream, the Prius stopped being an oddity and became a badge of identity. It became the ultimate virtue signal before that term even existed. When Hollywood A-listers began appearing at the Oscars not in limousines, but in the back of a Prius, the car's aesthetic ugliness was transformed into a form of high-status minimalism. Driving a Prius told the world you were smarter than the person in the Hummer. It suggested you were focused on the future while everyone else was stuck in the past. It was a status symbol of intellect over excess. This cultural shield allowed Toyota to sell hundreds of thousands of units, providing the scale necessary to drive down the cost of hybrid components. The industry could no longer afford to laugh. The domino effect was immediate and profound. Honda, which had beaten Toyota to the US market by months with the two-seat Insight, realized that the Prius had won the PR war. Ford, recognizing they were years behind, eventually entered into a patent-sharing agreement with Toyota to use their hybrid technology. Even the European manufacturers, who had bet their entire future on clean diesel, found themselves flat-footed. The the Prius had forced a global shift in engineering priorities. Efficiency was no longer a niche, it was a mandate. We see the fingerprints of the Prius in the most unlikely places today. Consider the modern hypercar, the Ferrari SF90, the McLaren P1, the Porsche 918 Spyder. These are cars that represent the pinnacle of automotive desire, and every one of them is a hybrid. They use the same fundamental logic pioneered by the Prius, using electric torque to fill the gaps in internal combustion. The Prius proved that the electric motor was not the enemy of the engine, but its most capable partner. But perhaps its greatest legacy is the psychological bridge it built for the consumer. The Prius normalized the idea of a car that thought for itself. It normalized regenerative braking, the silent start, and the digital energy flow monitor. It prepared the global public for the idea that a car didn't need to burn fuel to be on. The current EV revolution, led by companies like Tesla, did not happen in a vacuum. It happened on ground that had been painstakingly cleared by the Prius for 2 decades. By the time the Model S arrived, the idea of an electrified powertrain was no longer alien. It was proven. The Prius had already absorbed the skepticism, the jokes, and the early adopter risks. The Toyota Prius didn't win races. It didn't break records. It didn't provide a visceral connection between the driver and the road. In many ways, it was the death of the car as we knew it, the car as a romantic mechanical beast. But in its place, it gave us the car as a highly evolved tool. It was a car that prioritized the collective over the individual, the future over the present, and efficiency over ego. It changed the rules of the game so thoroughly that we often forget there was ever a different way to play. The Prius didn't just change the industry, it quieted it. And in that silence, it allowed us to hear what the future was supposed to sound like. History often overlooks the machines that simply work, favoring those that scream. If you believe the Prius deserves its place in the Automotive Hall of Fame, or if you think it was the beginning of the end for the driving enthusiast, let us know in the comments below. We read every perspective. And if you appreciate this analytical look at automotive history, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. It's the best way to support the channel and ensure we can keep producing these deep dives into the machines that shaped our world. Thank you for watching.